Hi, my name is Mike Pletz. I'm the owner-operator of Ever After Landscaping. I've also got this podcast, How to Hardscape, and I am a hardscaper on YouTube, Instagram, anywhere you can find that. And I am a hardscaper. What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 228 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, this is the 4-year anniversary of the How to Hardscape podcast to the date. We started back in October 2019. 4 years later, we have 228 episodes in the books. And I just wanted to take today's episode to actually go through a typical I am a hardscaper interview, just going through my answers to those questions, because I don't think I've ever done that. And I was thinking about having somebody actually come on the show and interview me for that, but I think that was a little bit too much, a little bit too self-centered, even for this show, just talking about myself. So I'll just keep it at me going through my responses to a typical I am a hardscaper interview. If you don't know the I am a hardscaper interviews, we typically have a set question list that we run through with each of our guests from start to finish, beginning with their background, running through their sales process, and then getting into some typical questions around things that have gone wrong in their business, to equipment that they use in their business and why, as well as mentors in their business, and ending with what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning. And that is what we've got on today's episode for the 4-year anniversary. I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening through these 4 years. We've really tried to keep this podcast evergreen, meaning that you can go back from the very start to now, listen to the content, and it's very much applicable. We try to keep the topics as unrepeatable as possible. The I Am a Hardscaper interviews definitely get repeating, but at least for the questions, but for the responses, it's always a little bit unique for each and every business owner. So it's always nice to have a business owner on and see their perspectives on each of these questions as well. But like I said there, just want to say thank you for tuning in throughout these 4 years. Whether you are a listener, a follower on Instagram, YouTube, if you share these episodes, if you've recommended guests, if you've messaged me, I really appreciate it all. Ratings, reviews, Apple, Spotify, I do see all of them, and I do really appreciate every one of you that has taken the time to do anything that I just kind of ran through there. Made a lot of amazing connections and a lot of great connections with people that have reached out over the years, and I'm grateful for every guest that has been on the show, anybody that's given me their valuable time to come on the show, answer the questions, or any of you that have just reached out to make a connection. I really, really do appreciate that, and it's what keeps me going from year in and year out with this podcast. So please do not stop, and if you haven't reached out and shot me a message, please do so, and look forward to hearing from you. And before we get into today's episode, we want to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off your services there. And if you don't know, we have the How to Hardscape headquarters. This is a software that'll help you streamline processes in your business, from budgeting, estimating, job costing, time tracking, CRM, and so much more. So if you're looking for a software to help you out this coming season, reach out to me at How to Hardscape on Instagram, or go to members.howtohardscape.com. There we also have training courses if you're looking to get into hardscaping, or those training courses are actually available to software users, and the purpose behind those is to use them for training and onboarding for your employees. And we're going to continue to add to those training courses, as well as features to the How to Hardscape headquarters software. And as we do for each of those, as we add more things, the pricing will increase, so you can lock in your pricing. That pricing increases for new users, and for existing users, you're locked in on your pricing, so you avoid those increases, those price increases. So it's never a good time. So it's never a bad time to sign up for the How to Hardscape headquarters. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So the first question that I asked guests on the I Am a Hardscaper interview is very basic. It is just give us some context about you, yourself, how you got started in the industry, and what led you to starting your own hardscape business. The reason why I asked this is just a good jumping off point to learn a little bit more about them. I like to come into these interviews knowing as little as possible about these guests. Keeps me curious, keeps me asking good follow-up questions for the most part. And we just kind of go down a rabbit hole with this. So for me personally, I started working at a part-time position at a grocery store through high school and then into my first year of university. Actually, I carried through with this part-time job, very small hours after I started at this stone yard throughout university. But it was this point in working at this grocery store that my manager came up to me in my first year of university and asked me if I was looking for a summer job. And of course, being a broke university student, yes, I was looking for something that would give me a lot more hours than I was getting at the grocery store. So my manager recommended me to her husband, and he was the manager of this stone yard location, and I went in for an interview there to try to get a job there. Me and actually another close buddy of mine, also working at the grocery store, went in for interviews there, and we both got the job because, of course, they were looking for somebody to definitely come in and work with them there. Now, I had a decision to make right away whether I was going to work in the yard or the office. And either way, I was still going to get the training to learn about the products and also learn about how to install the products and everything like that. But the decision was, do I work in the office or do I work down in the yard? And with the appeal of getting on equipment and working with equipment, made me choose the yard over the office. My close buddy went actually into the office and worked in the office. Now, that is my introduction into this industry, because my first week there, they were actually updating the demo area, and they had a contractor that they worked with closely contracted to do that, but they wanted somebody else to kind of give them a hand with labor. So this is my first getting thrown in the deep end, learning a little bit about the installation practices, screeding, laying, polymeric sand, building up walls and everything like that. And it was really interesting, especially since I stepped on a rake my first time in front of these contractors, these experienced contractors, and made a fool of myself. But ultimately, it was a great experience to have and to be thrown in. I didn't grow up in this whole building world. My dad, for the most part, wanted to be able to take care of those sort of hands-on things and not really teach us those building aspects or anything to do with renovations or anything like that, because he wanted to really take the time to play things like hockey with us. So I definitely didn't grow up in a whole hands-on, getting our hands dirty environment. So this is my first foray into that type of world, and I loved it, especially throughout that season, getting to learn more about equipment, operation, getting to learn more about the product. This stone yard actually paid me to do a little bit of studying in my first week on my own time. So they just gave me some documents, some information, said, hey, whatever hours you put into studying in your own time, let us know and we'll pay you for those hours. So that was awesome. I didn't take a huge advantage of that. For the most part, most of my training came from actually in the yard and learning about the product and asking questions. And thankfully, I'm a curious enough person that I asked those questions and got to know more and more. But that was, for the most part, my first year at the stone yard. It wasn't until probably my second year that I actually took on a side project, very small side project. My manager had somebody that needed something done. I think I was just lifting and relaying a few slabs. Went out, did that. Nothing too much. And then my third year was the year that my manager had somebody that needed a backyard driveway. So the actual garage opened up both ways and you could drive right through. So we were laying this essentially driveway, and this was on HPB at the time. This is back in, so I started at the stone yard in 2007, I believe. I could have been 2008. I believe it was 2007. So this would have been about 2010. I think, that I'm laying this driveway, and we're doing it on HPB, and I already know the advantages of HPB at this point. And I woke up, did not want to go. This was on a Sunday, did not want to go and do this project, and woke up. It was completely pouring rain, and I thought, yes, I'm not going to have to go and lay this backyard driveway, especially in this rain. Turns out my manager's knocking at my front door. I get up and he says, come on, let's go. We're laying on HPV. We can definitely do this in the rain. So I got dressed and went out and worked for 8 hours in the rain, laying this backyard driveway with them. So that was, I guess, not so much my own side project, but that opened the door, because then that client actually reached out to me a couple weeks later and said, hey, I have a friend that wants to do a front walkway, and just wanted to know if you'd be interested in that. So this kind of got the ball rolling for me to take on these side projects, because I wasn't going to take on customers that were coming into this stone yard. Those went out for referrals for contractors, but it was these side projects that people would actually reach out to me to do them that really got the ball rolling. With those side projects, that next one, that front walkway, I could have quoted for a lot more, but I went with about a week's worth of pay for about 2 days of work with it. They did the excavation, the base preparation for the most part. This was actually completely on HPB, so it was just a matter of putting geotextile down, putting that HPB down, and then starting to lay these slabs. But that was great experience for me. I hired a buddy of mine to come on with me for a day of that, and it's actually, I drove by it about last year, and it still looks great. I don't lay solely on HPB anymore. Still, I do a proper base with HPB bedding layer, but that was my first side project that I did all on my own, hiring a buddy. Their neighbor then asked me to do their walkway, as well as that same client asked me to do their backyard, just a small patio and walkway in the back there. And funny thing is, not knowing my numbers back then, because I was just trying to earn some more money for university, I quoted the same number for the front patio or front sort of entrance area that I did for that same client for their backyard patio, that I did for that same client for that side walkway, their neighbor as well. So when it came to telling the neighbor in front of that other client what the job would cost, they asked, does every job of yours cost the same? So that was a little bit of a learning experience with knowing how much I should be able to charge for these, as well as just getting to know a little bit more about what I should be charging, I guess, is what I just said there. But I took those numbers to my manager, and when he talked to me about overhead expenses, and he talked to me about, am I factoring in fuel, and am I factoring in the usage of my vehicle in these and everything like this. So that is actually what opened my eyes to knowing my numbers a little bit more, which, as you can tell throughout, if you listen to this podcast and my content and everything, you know, I love talking about knowing your numbers, which is the first thing to actually how I got started with the budget and estimate spreadsheet, as well as how to Hardscape headquarters software from that. Okay, where do I go from here? I continued working at the stone yard for about 7 years or so, took a couple of years off somewhere in there, and returned for one more season at the stone yard. But at that last season, I knew that I would be starting my own business in the following year. So that following year, I came back to help them with opening for a couple of weeks, and then went off on my own. So in that following year, I started when it was still snow on the ground a little bit, just helping them get started for their season. But they already knew at that point that I was starting my own business. And actually, at that same time, the main manager actually went off to start, or actually go out and work at another stone yard. So now I had a couple of stone yards to choose from to actually purchase product from if I ever wanted to with that. At the same time, my wife and I were moving out of that same city. So this began this sort of process that I'm still in, where I'm trying to decide which city I'm servicing and which city I'm focusing on. Still in the process of determining that, but for the most part, I'm diversifying the cities that we are currently working in. Of course, a lot of my projects come from that same city that I started in at those stone yards, just from where I started my business and from where lots of those leads started to come in on. And word of mouth kind of got the ball rolling with that, where I'm not working too hard for these leads, and it just makes sense to not work hard for these leads and to stick with that city, even though it's about an hour away from where we're currently living. So that being said, Stoneyard, I continued to work there. I continued to work at the grocery store till about my 5th year at the Stoneyard. So I was working tons and going to university. Obviously, with all that, I didn't go to classes too much to be able to work to pay for university, which is an interesting revolving door. Ended up getting my degree, which is great. But decided to start my own business, went off, and my whole thought process with starting my own business was to focus on lift and relays. And the reason why I was doing this was because I knew that going off on my own and having all these contractor contacts that I've made over the years, I figured that I could take on the jobs that they didn't want and be able to give them the jobs that I wasn't able to take on if any of those leads came in, to kind of make a mutually beneficial relationship. Not every contractor was too happy or was willing to even discuss with me business after I went off on my own, but there were some great contractors that were, and still have those relationships to this day. And so that was my whole thought process on going off on my own and starting Lift and Relay, as well as a couple different things in addition to that. One is low overhead, so I didn't have to purchase much. I already had a truck. I already had those basic hand tools. I did have to buy a demo saw, but the year prior to going out on my own, I did a pretty big backyard patio and pool surround. That took about a month's worth of weekends and long days to be able to do. But with that payout, I was able to buy a demo saw and buy everything else that I needed. So I knew that project set me up to be able to go off on my own the following year. So stick with low overhead, lift and relay, maintenance work. And the other reason why I did this, because I'm very much into personal finance, and everywhere that I was listening to at the time was talking about how bull runs typically last for about 8 years on average. And at this point, we were already 8 or 9 years into a bull run since the 2008 crisis, housing crisis, and all that. So I thought, you know what, maybe better to play this safe and stick with low overhead, so that if a recession was to happen or a bear market was to come where people pull back on their expenses and what they were planning to spend their money on, I would be set up for success, because I wouldn't have bills that I would need to pay and projects that I would need to take on. I would use that bear run as a jumping off point to purchase cheap equipment and to maybe get an employee that was leaving their previous job. I was going to use that as a good jumping off point. Turns out a couple of years later, we hit that pandemic and we had a lot of demand come in. And now it does seem like we're hitting that bear run that was called for many years ago. So I did talk about this in more detail in a episode called Risk, where I talk about the thought process of risk and the risk that I wasn't taking on going low overhead in that lift and relay business. But there's always the flip side of that, in the risk that I'm leaving out in the money I could have made through that high surge in demand if I was set up to be able to service that demand. So there's always two sides to risk. The risk that you are not, diving into those purchases and you're being risk-free in a sense. But it's also the flip side of that, the risk that you are leaving on the table, the money that you're leaving on the table, should the market not react the way that you think it will. It does come down to not really trying to time the market in any sense, just like personal finance and investing and everything like that. But at that time, I really didn't have a choice with the financial situation. It just made sense still, going back at it, that, you know what, lift and relay, smart thing to do for the position that I was in. And I definitely don't take that back. And it's not until now at this time that I'm looking forward to being able to grow my business out of this bear run, out of this recession that we seem to be in. And I'll be looking forward to that now, and where that takes my business in the near future, coming out of this recession here. I just want to take a break from today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Cycle CPA. You may have a CRM or project management software in place, but what data are you using to ensure your estimating is accurate? Having a proper accounting setup and accurate bookkeeping done is key to understanding overhead expenses and other costs that must be recouped in your estimates. Cycle CPA is a remote bookkeeping and CFO firm that helps to connect the dots from the financial reports to the hardscape and landscape data needed in order to reach high profits. They provide landscape and hardscape industry benchmarking, job costing, financials by service line, advisory meetings, and much more. Cycle CPA's team of accountants are specialized within the hardscape and landscape industry, and you can visit them at cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. Okay, now we're caught up to where I start my business. Those first couple of years, actually it was the second year in business. The first year, my jumping off point was I signed up 2 projects. I signed up a sod project that, don't even know I should be saying this, but I actually did while I was still working at the stone yard in those final 2 weeks. And so I did that sod job during the week at some point. Completed it in a day, and then I had another project. It was a backyard patio, a larger one with a wood-burning fire pit, and that was going to be done on Gator Base, and that was awesome. The client was not awesome, but that was just another project that, you know what, proof of concept, getting my season started, and that was going to take me about a week or 2 to do all by myself. So that was awesome to have on the books, and to be able to use that as a jumping off point to continue to sign up projects through the remainder of the season. The first season went great. I not a lot of memories really came from that. A lot of me working by myself there, and I know I did some driveway extensions. I did lots of walkways, lots of lift and relays. Not a lot of whole new design build stuff, except that first project that I did, surprisingly there. But that second season, I had a lead from an area that I still currently service, and it's been in the area that I've gotten tons of my work from, and I'm forever grateful for this first client reaching out to me. But they needed their driveway lift and relayed. And if you listen to the Not Our Finest Hour podcast, you'll hear me talk about this old folks area, or this gated community that I work. And this is where that comes from. This couple reached out to me, said that they had a driveway that they needed lift and relayed. I knew this area. We supplied the stone for this area when I worked at the stone yard. And so these houses are about 10 to 15 years old at this point. And I know a lot of these driveways need lift and relaying. They also had their side walkway that they needed lift and relayed, as well as their backyard patio, as well as a wall in their backyard that they needed to be fixed. So lots of work on this initial job. And I knew that if I quoted this properly, if I made a good impression on this client, that me getting into this area would be really good for my business, because I figured that these people would really love to see a younger gentleman working really hard to grow their business. I would be front and center, because this is actually at the very entrance of this community, this house. And I just knew that optically it would look good, and I may get tons of interest, being that lots of these driveways needed lift and relayed. So I priced it accordingly, and I got the job. I did the project, and right after that project, I must have quoted this almost entire street worth of houses. and probably signed up about half of them. Did tons of lift and relays. This was my whole second season, was just lift and relay after lift and relay after lift and relay. I don't think I had, until the end of the season, a full new build project. And even that end of season project was just a concrete overlay. So that whole season really burnt me out from doing lift and relays. And it was at that point that I was thinking about starting this How to Hardscape thing. I'd already had this idea of starting How to Hardscape for many, many years. It wasn't until I really wanted that business experience before I started it. The goal was to bring people on to talk about business and to use that also for my own understanding of business to further my own business, essentially. As well as to put that information out there for everybody. So at this point, at the end of the season, I'm thinking I need to start doing something that's more fulfilling. I can't keep doing lift and relays. I could in the future, and I do plan in the future to have a lift and relay division to kind of use that as training for a design build division. But I needed to get out of these lift and relays, and design build was where I wanted to go. So that off season, I focused on working on How to Hardscape, which would become the How to Hardscape website. Later that year, so I started the How to Hardscape website in January or February 2019. Later that year, I started the podcast in October 2019. But it was that off season that I focused on learning 3D design. I focused on learning more about business and to really try to get some awesome design build projects for the following season. And that is where my business kind of leaves off today. And really focusing on that design build during the pandemic kind of took some I did have like a 3-year goal for transitioning out of lift and relay. During the pandemic, I did take on more lift and relay than I probably wanted to, just because of the material delays in ordering. I wanted to have those lift and relay projects to fit in those pockets that would be left behind for me in those material delays. So I did hold on to a little bit more about that. And it wasn't until fairly recently that I decided I do want to hold on to lift and relay, because I did want one crew lift and relay, one crew design build in the future for this. So that leaves me to where I am today in my business there. I could go into more depth on How to Hardscape and everything that I'd started with there, but I think I'll touch on a little bit of that sprinkled throughout the remainder of these questions. And I've already been talking probably a bit too much here. So the next question that I ask is getting into sales process. So I'm going to run through all of these in one straight question here. Questions are: where do your leads come from? Has it changed throughout your business? Then it goes to initial consultation. Do you charge? Do you not charge? What does your initial consultation look like? And what does your payment structure look like, as well as proposals? So at the beginning of my business, my projects came from solely word of mouth, and that worked well because I didn't need a lot of work. I was very inefficient back then. Did not need a lot of work to sign up everything. And then that second year, my whole season almost got booked out with that one street lift and relays there. So it wasn't until recently that I needed to kind of put a little bit of money into Facebook ads. I already knew a little bit about Facebook ads from previous experiences with smaller businesses. And I already knew about targeting and all that. So that worked out fairly well for me through the pandemic years, especially Facebook ads. I did have one good year of Google ads, though I haven't had great success this year with Google ads. This year I did focus a little bit about paid marketing, but I knew I wanted to, throughout those good years where demand was really high, I wanted to focus on alternative organic ways of getting leads. And it was at this point where I decided to get into YouTube. And that's I Am a Hardscaper on YouTube if you're interested in looking at that. But I knew I wanted to do that, and I chose YouTube, and this is why. I thought I could either go Instagram heavy or I could go YouTube heavy for my personal business. I thought Instagram, because it's all short form, I didn't want to focus on short form. I wanted the harder thing, which I think is longer form. And YouTube not only pays much better for their advertising, but it's also advertisement for my own business. So I knew if I grew YouTube, I would be paid by YouTube, and it would also be a funnel for me for my business. In addition to that, I wanted something that I could send links to my clients to very easily and share with my clients as to how my installation process is, so that I just incorporate those right into my proposal, so that they've met me, they've seen my face, and then when I send my proposal, it actually has the exact way how I'm going to build these projects for them, and it's got my face on it again, and it has some sort of authority built up with the subscribers, the views that I've built up and continue to build up, so that there's some sort of authority and selling point for them to go with me for that. I didn't think that Instagram was as great with sharing links for this, and as well as the analytics that go into this. One thing that I do kind of see now, however, is that, and I will be focusing a little bit more on Instagram next year, is that YouTube really brings in those clients or potential clients that do a lot of their own research. And that's fine, but it does bring in those clients that maybe a little bit more picky because they're willing to put in that effort to do a lot of their own research, see how something should be installed. Maybe even that client that is thinking about doing the DIY project for themselves, but maybe got in over their head and decided to reach out to a professional, which may not be all the time the best client to get. Whereas Instagram, it's more so for entertainment more than education. So those are clients that are following accounts, and this is just my theory, following accounts for that entertainment value or to get ideas from them, and may have found you locally and may just reach out to you just because they love your work. They love seeing your face and talking about projects that you're on and so on there. So because Instagram is a little bit more entertainment based than education based, at least YouTube, you can go education or entertainment. I decided to go education for the most part with that. I feel like Instagram would be a great way to kind of build that brand that allows clients to see your beautiful work and then want you because of your work. Whereas YouTube, in the direction that I went with education based, is more clients that are doing their research well in advance for their project, which I do think the more valuable client is that client that wants you for your work, rather than you and they found you through YouTube, through a search engine. YouTube's the second largest search engine behind Google, and Google owns YouTube. So I do think that brings in that client that's more DIY, maybe is leaning towards a professional in that sense. So just my thoughts on YouTube versus Instagram and why I went YouTube over Instagram, and will focus a little bit more on Instagram next year for my own business there. But like I said, I wanted to really focus on something during those good years because I knew that it would take me at least 2 years to set that something up or grow that something to be able to start bringing in leads. I knew it would take me a couple of years, so I started in 2021 for my YouTube channel. I believe it was 2021. Now 2023, 2 years later, and it's got some traction, it's got some steam, and I'm getting leads from it. So that's the best part of YouTube and why I decided to go YouTube heavy during those good years, and wanted to really focus on one thing to make that one thing really, really stand out there. That's why I went YouTube for my personal business. That's where leads are coming from. Also, paid ads. Facebook's been doing really well for me. And a little bit of SEO, though my website isn't the best for SEO because I did focus probably a bit too much on the How to Hardscape website SEO than my own personal business. And those are where my leads are coming from. The initial consultation, I do still in my business want to visit as many people as possible. That being said, I do heavily pre-qualify to be able to go out to these clients' properties. So that's kind of my Do I charge? No, I don't. I don't think most people in my market do charge. Am I willing to charge in the future? Yes, probably. But I do feel my pre-qualification process has drastically improved since I started my business. And I think that as long as I pre-qualify good enough, I don't think I do need to charge. But I do think in the future I will, if that makes sense. Don't have some strong thoughts for or against. I do like the thought process of charging for consultation, but letting the client know that it goes to charity. That's probably the direction that I take for it in the future if I do decide to start charging for consultations. But no, I do not charge for consultations. I do charge for designs though. So any step after that, it definitely starts to get into charging for something. Though at the beginning of my business and for the first few years of my business, I did not charge for designs. I wanted that experience to learn how to do 3D designs, especially with real world projects. So I didn't start charging for designs for a few years and then started to charge for those. My initial consultation, I let the client do most of the talking. I ask simple questions. Immediately I ask them what's their vision for their project, what do they want their project to look like. Basic things like side walkways, front entrances, those have very basic questions to go along with. Not a lot to do with those. A lot of my leads in the first couple of years did come from asphalt companies. I reached out to asphalt companies and asked them if they needed anybody to do front entrances, for example, lift and relays when for a front entrance interlock or a new front entrance. So I continue to do those throughout the years, and those don't bring a lot of questions with them, just basic fixes, especially lift and relays. I do have 3 different tiers for lift and relays. I do have a basic tier where we lift the product, scrape off the bedding layer, put a new bedding layer in, and put the product back down. Obviously polymeric sand in the joints. And then the next step in the process of that would be, which nobody takes, but it's just there to let them know the difference in pricing, would be lift the product, put a new base in, put the product back down. But then the upsell from that, in what people do choose as opposed to that, would be new product. So new base, new product, basically a new entire project for them. That's how I go about lift and relays. That's how I go about the initial consultation, just to let them know those 3 different options, and I'll give them pricing on each of those when we go ahead and price those. But an outdoor living space, let them do the talking, let them know the different options. They typically don't know about lighting or gas fire features, so I do let them know and show them pictures on those beforehand. And when it comes to one question that I really liked, which was mentioned by Tom Reber on this project, was if you had a magic wand and you could wave it through your project, through your backyard, what would you want it to look like? So I kind of take a spin on that and ask them, what if budget wasn't an option or anything like that, what would you want in your backyard? That kind of helps me to let them know, hey, we could do a phased option. If you wanted, say, a patio, a fire feature, a outdoor kitchen, a pond, this is the phased approach that we could do with it to get you your dream backyard if you really wanted to. So that's how I take my initial consultation. Then I take it back. I do a work area proposal. So the work area proposal has the different work areas and pricing for each of those work areas on it. And obviously it has my installation process in there. And then for payment structure, we go 10% to get you on the schedule, an additional 25% prior to the initial working day. So I usually do, these days I do just when I start work, the first day, just 25%. And then the remainder kind of is flexible. If it's a larger project, we do draws, and then we try to leave 10% to the end. If it's a smaller project, we'll just do 10%, 25%, and then the remainder 65% on completion. So that's how I go about my payment structure. Larger projects, I try to leave 10% to the end. The final question that I ask everybody is, what is a horror story that you've experienced in your business? And knock on wood, I don't want to be one of those guests that say nothing, not to call anybody out there, but I haven't had something brutally horrible that I've had to go to court for, or I've had damages on, or anything like that. The biggest thing that I've had would maybe be my very first client that we didn't see eye to eye on many things. And it wasn't a great experience with him. He did send me a photo of his exposed aggregate driveway after having completed the project, and it had one of the aggregates missing. And I asked him, he sent me the photo, and then I asked him to send me whereabouts on the driveway it was, and it was in an area of a driveway in the front walkway where we didn't go anywhere near, and it was just me on this project, so I would know this, and he knew this. He was just trying to get some more money out of me. So that would be my one story, and thankfully I sent him an email back saying, hey, you know that we weren't working this area. I was not in this area. This was not me that broke that one exposed aggregate piece off your driveway. We are not responsible for this, and I didn't hear back from them since. So thankfully Gatorbase has held up on that project, that I haven't had to go back for my warranty for that. So I haven't had to see that client ever again. We did have another problem with cuts around the fire feature with this client, and he wanted the fire feature square to the fence, which wasn't square to the deck. And I let him know this prior to building the fire feature, and said that we couldn't change how the fire feature was built, and I proposed it to be square to the deck, and when I built it square to the fence, he didn't like how it looked afterwards, and I said that the change order would cost this, and he decided to keep it as it is. And then he didn't like the cuts around the fire feature with the border. So I did fix those cuts for him, but said that this would be the only change that we would do for the project. And then the cherry on top of that was that exposed aggregate piece coming off his driveway. So that would be my one horror story. I think I handled it as well as I possibly could have, especially with the lack of experience that I had, being that was my first project out on my own business at the time. Thankfully, nothing too huge has happened since. May have some updates in the future on a horror story, but for now, that is my one horror story. My next group of questions is on equipment, installation practices. I'm going to echo what most people say. Open graded bays, love it. I have a high precision altimeter. I won't mention the brand, but I really love that, despite what most people say about not most people, what some people say about those, especially in the installation practice of those. They are slower than a rotary laser level, though I do have a rotary laser level sometimes, just because I'm lazy. I'll just use, especially for a quick wall or something like that, I'll just use my high precision altimeter for those builds. Installation practices, I think that's about it. That's a tool that I love and use in my business. Another tool, I love my Bartell Global Reversible Plate Compactor, the 1570, I think it is, and the 2570. 1570 especially is just because it's small, and it still packs a decent punch to it. And I rent the majority of my larger pieces of equipment. And the reason why I rent goes back to remaining lean in my business, and also my personal situation as to being able to work in many different cities and not have to lug equipment around. I price that into my projects, and I just have equipment. Either I pick it up if it's close to a rental shop, or I just have it delivered and picked up by a rental company, and that just gets priced into the project for that. That's my thoughts on equipment there. Obviously, getting into mentors and people that I look up to in the industry. Best way to go about this is just to say, people that I've had on the podcast, I respect and look up to quite a bit. For the most part, if you reach out to me to be on the podcast, I don't accept. I'll start to follow you on Instagram and see what kind of work you do, and ask people actually if I know people that are connected to you about you. And at some point in the future, I'll reach out to you. But I just have had so many people reach out to ask for interviews that it got to a point where I probably had one bad interview that I didn't publish, and decided that I needed some sort of pre-qualifying process in this. So I only take on people that have been recommended to me from previous guests. So if a previous guest has been on the show and has recommended somebody, I definitely have those guests on the show. But when it comes to people reaching out to me, I do have some sort of process there to be able to get to know a little bit more about you and your business prior to having you on the show. So if I have had you on the show, and don't take this as if you haven't been on the show haven't reached out to you just yet because I've been a little bit busy, especially this season with everything that I got going on. But those that have been on the show, and especially those that I follow on Instagram, those are the people that I look up to. Those are the people that have helped me along the way. And I really appreciate everybody that has given me their time to be on the show and to go through an I'm a Hardscaper interview, which is an hour long, then go through a roundtable interview, which is an hour long. And then we have the roundtable rallies, which people continue to give me their time to be on. And I really, really do appreciate. And those are the people that I look up to and inspire me in business, and especially this business, to continue on. So I'll just leave it at that, as opposed to starting to give a bunch of shout outs here and leaving people out. And then my final question is, what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning? And for me, what is one thing that I know now that I wish I knew from the very beginning? I don't regret the decisions that I made for the reasons why I made them, but I do wish that I was a little bit more prepared for that demand surge. Not like I could have ever predicted that or anything, but that could have put a little bit more money in my pocket if I was a little bit more prepared for that in my business. I do think that even in my first year, even after how much I talk about knowing my numbers, I wish I would have known a little bit more about budgeting and estimating, because it was those first couple of years that I developed that budget and estimate spreadsheet, if you know, that I created and then released to the public in 2020. But it was those first couple of years that I refined that and retooled that. I wish I had that spreadsheet from the very beginning. It really helped my business. And we had hundreds of people buy that spreadsheet, which I'm grateful for, and I know has helped people. And people have reached out to me and said that spreadsheet really helped their business and really helped them know what they needed to charge for their business. That spreadsheet now became the software. The software is the How to Hardscape headquarters. So if you're interested in that and what we've got going on there, that's going to be a major resource with what we're planning to do with it. As I said at the beginning of the episode, that resource is going to grow with more features being added to it, but also the training resources. I'm really big on that, because not only is this for everybody to be able to hop in on and purchase, but it's also for me, my business. So I'm trying to set up, because I'm not trying to grow a major business right now at this point. There will be a point, hopefully soon in the future, that I'm going to go a lot heavier into hiring, as well as to getting a location-dependent business as opposed to servicing many different cities. That I'll go heavier into my business. But until then, the smartest thing for me to do for my business is to invest into systems and processes. And that's why this software is kind of be put center stage, because I want that foundation in place so that when I do go heavy into hiring, I've already got that onboarding process into place, and I've already got those systems into place where everybody that I've hired into my business has gone through the same thing. And then there's no pointing fingers at, you know what, I've had these two people from the very beginning. They don't have to do the same things that these other employees have had to do and jump through hoops, or, you know, anything like this. I also want a roadmap. We're going to be creating a roadmap feature in the software where I can put courses into place for employees, and they know what those courses are going to get them. We'll also have a point system into place, which we're actually working on right now, where employees clocking in on time, clocking out, remembering certain things, doing certain things like completing courses, health and safety training courses, things like this give them points. And when they reach a certain amount of points, maybe they get a raise, or maybe that helps them set themselves up for that next step in our business. For example, from a laborer to an installer, or from an installer to a foreman. Things like this is what I want in place for my business, because this is what I know I can work on right now in my business until we get to a point where we can really start to focus on a single location in our business. So with all that said, that is my I Am a Hardscaper interview. I thank you for listening to the very end if you did, and I really do appreciate you. Like I said from the beginning of this podcast, I do really appreciate each and every one of you tuning into this podcast, following on our socials, sharing, liking, subscribing, commenting, ratings, reviews, Apple, Spotify, wherever and however. I do really appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening into this episode. And thank you to our sponsor, Cycle CPA. Cycle CPA has been a huge supporter for us for almost 2 years now. So I do appreciate also Cycle CPA. Bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know how to Hardscape sent you for $200 off their services there. And I think that's all I'm going to leave you with for today's episode. We look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast. And thank you for 4 years.